Welcome back to another episode of Outrageous HR. I'm your host, Catherine Boudreau, and today we'll talk through common I-9 mistakes and how those can be costly to your company. Joining me today is Desiree Throckmorton.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. So I work in HR compliance, and what I have found is that when I meet new people and they ask what I do and I say I work in HR compliance, there are no follow-up questions. It's really a conversation killer. I'm saddened to know that people don't find it very interesting, but I do. I enjoy taking difficult I-9 issues or audit issues and turning them into solutions that actually can have some reward at the end for the organization. Here at OutSolve, I'm the VP of Operations for our I-9 services. I'm also a consultant and help clients manage the variety of issues that come up with state and local compliance as well as federal compliance.
So Desiree, in your career with HR compliance and I-9 verifications, can you tell us a story about when you've come in contact with what not to do?
Certainly. I think paper I-9s tend to be the biggest challenge for employers because there's not checks and balances. If you forget to sign something, you forget to date something, what's the mechanism to ensure that a human didn't forget to do something? In addition to that, I think that employers with lots of folks doing completion of Section 2, there's a big variety of understanding of the rules associated with how that's done that I think may be misinterpreted. Maybe someone was trained more recently than someone else, and that can lead to variation in understanding. And like I said, I think that interpretation too goes a long way. I know one time I came across a situation where we had agents who were taking the documents, meeting the employees, and having someone else in the back completing Section 2. But the form actually says, I attest that this information is accurate and representative of the person presenting it. But the person in the back never saw the person to do that verification. And so that process was a misinterpretation of how it should actually be done. So I think that was the case that was pretty eye-opening.
All right. I'm going to give you some common myths about I-9 completion, and I would love for you to give us the fact.
Okay, let's go.
All right. First one. I-9s must be completed for employees every year.
Yeah, I like this one because the answer is no, but kind of. So if you rehire someone, yes, the best practice would be to do a new I-9. But we have had people ask us, do we need to do an I-9 for employees every year? And the answer is no. Once they've done it, unless they have temporary work authorization, those folks you do need to re-verify using Supplement B. But employees, let's say, who are citizens authorized to work, you don't have to do that again. You don't redo that process. So I think that's a common misunderstanding that people think, well, we need to do I-9s every year, or if someone's passport, U.S. passport expires, do a new I-9. No, you don't need to do that. Once you've satisfied their identity and work authorization, you don't have to do it again unless they're rehired.
All right, the second one.
Yep.
We can pre-fill Section 1 to make onboarding faster.
False. The Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, as y'all know, they basically issued guidance that prohibits employers from pre-populating. So the employee absolutely has to interact with and complete Section 1. The employer cannot do that for them.
Noted. And the last one. Any authorized representative can complete Section 2.
That is true, but I think it's messy. So while I do think that the rules say, yes, you can do that, it creates a big mess when someone doesn't know the rules around how you're supposed to complete Section 2. Again, the rules of engagement, you don't tell the person, bring in your passport. You tell them, bring in something from the lists of acceptable documents. It's up to the employee to choose what they present. So I think those kind of things can be missed by your Aunt Linda next door or, whomever, because they think that, they just have to get your passport and write it down. In addition, how do they know what the right document number is? A lot of times documents have different numbers. And when you're passing something to E-Verify, you need to know what the right document number is, or you're going to make a big mess that you have to clean up later. So I feel like using just anybody to do it that isn't trained on the process creates more work in the end.
So there are two categories of common I-9 errors. There's the technical and the substantive. Can you break down a definition of each of those for us?
Sure. Basically, a technical violation is something that's correctable. A substantive error is a more serious violation that cannot be corrected, and it can, in fact, affect the validity of the form. So did you actually verify someone's work authorization? If they can't validate that as well as identity based on how it was processed, then it's hard to say that it's just a technical violation. So there is a big difference between the two. Department of Homeland Security, when they're conducting audits, they do give grace to allow employers to make the corrections of technical violations. You get 10 days to fix them. The fines associated with substantive errors are much greater than technical errors. However, technical errors can turn into finable offenses if they're not corrected within 10 days.
So can you walk us through some of the most commonly seen substantive mistakes?
I would say probably the most common are just missing forms. It's difficult for employers sometimes just to be sure that they have a form for every person, especially when they have paper forms. It's hard to correlate the payroll records with the big binders. Backdating I-9s, I've seen that as well. That's a pretty big issue that employers sometimes don't want to look like they're late, which brings me to the next one is, lateness of I-9s, not completing Section 1 on or before the first day, or not completing Section 2 within 3 days prior.
Can you share with us some of the proactive steps that HR teams can make to avoid these things?
Know what you don't know. I think that a lot of employers will look to do an internal audit, but when you're auditing and maybe you don't know what you don't know that there are issues there that you don't even realize. I think, as mentioned, having a lot of different verifiers means that there could be a lot of information that could be right or wrong based on the interpretation of those people. So who audits your information, I think, is important. You don't want the people doing the verifications to do the audit. So it's kind of hard to figure out, who's the best person to do it. In my opinion, it should be someone from the outside, just because you're coming from a neutral territory. You just want to, go and evaluate and assess. So I think that's important. Go in, assess before DHS ever does. Training your HR staff. I think, if you do have internal verifiers doing this for you, make sure they're trained. Just e-verify training alone is not good enough. It doesn't tell them as much as they need to know to do this right.
Moving along, I have some frequently asked questions from our clients. We have a remote workforce. How do we handle I-9 verification when we can't physically examine documents?
That is easier to answer today than it was in early 2023. And that is because the USCIS has updated their guidelines to say that employers can conduct the verification appointment virtually. Such employers would need to be enrolled in E-Verify as well.
Okay. ICE enforcement is increasing. How worried should we be?
I think pretty worried. Pretty much every day, things are changing as it relates to temporary protected statuses. I mean, just today, we got more emails from E-Verify stating that there were changes to folks in different countries that are no longer eligible. I know that ICE has they've doubled their officers, 10,000 to 22,000. They're not all going to be looking at I-9s, of course, but that does tell you that this is a place in which a lot of resources are being spent.
What happens if we discover errors in existing I-9s? Do we just fix them?
That's a great question. I think it's important to not try to hide the mistakes. That's one of the things that if you read the manual, the M274 that's published to give guidance to employers on this, is they say, if you're doing paper I-9s, don't use whiteout, right? And so the same thing is true for electronic I-9s. You need to know if something was changed, who changed it, what was the change, when did it happen? And so for the paper forms, you would need to initial and date the change that's made. There's a deference given during an audit if an employer has seen to conduct an audit and make, amendments to, correct those forms. The USCIS actually does reduce the fines if they see that an employer has tried to, in good faith, make those corrections.
We have some paper I-9s and some electronic I-9s. Do we need to convert them, or is this okay?
That's a question I think that a lot of employers are grappling with is, this requirement has been around since 1986. So a lot of employers still have filing cabinets full of I-9s. And so it's hard to know that you have one on file for every employee if they're in a filing cabinet somewhere. Who knows if it was ever done? It's hard to reconcile that. So I do think that energy spent on cleaning that up, to centralize, to have one source that says, where's the I-9 for this person, and to be able to retrieve it is important, especially if there's an audit. You have 3 days to gather those documents and provide it. I think that's difficult to do if they're in filing cabinets across the country or in some HR manager's inbox somewhere.
So Desiree, we've got some rapid fire questions for you.
Let's go.
All right. E-Verify, are we required to use it?
Not necessarily. If you're doing the remote verification, yes. Some states also do requirement, and some federal contracts requirement.
What's one resource every HR professional should bookmark for I-9 guidance?
I would say the USCIS M274 Handbook. And I can tell you there are questions not answered in that handbook, but it's about 300 pages and it's helpful.
If an employer could only make one change to improve their I-9 compliance right now, what would it be?
Get an electronic solution and centralize.
Is there anything else you want to expand on before we move forward?
I just want to say it's not that easy to get this right, and it is very easy to get it wrong. There's a lot of information to try to keep up with. It's changing on a daily basis. So I feel for all the employers that are trying to get this right.
So just some key takeaways to wrap up. Substantive errors cannot be corrected after the fact.
Correct.
The most common mistakes are also preventable.
Absolutely true.
And proactive audits, consistent training, and the right digital tools are your best line of defense.
100%.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Desiree. I know you never get tired of seeing me.
Never.
OutSolve offers I-9 management solutions to help you tackle some of these tasks. Download our recent research study, I-9 Compliance Trends, Enforcement Trends and Best Practices. Connect with an OutSolve compliance expert to assess your I-9 process. Please feel free to continue the conversation in HR Gumbo City, our Slack community built specifically for HR professionals. It's a great place to ask other HR professionals questions or for guidance and advice. HR Gumbo members get exclusive first access to checklists, guides, research reports, and more. Visit outsolve.com/HRG-city to join today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.